Committee. Can I start off with the first item on the agenda? Can we have the election of the chair and vice chair for the municipal year? Can I ask for nomination for the chair of the committee?
I nominate Councillor Antoinette Bramble.
And I second that.
So can we agree the nomination?
Yes.
If I can hand over to the chair.
Thank you, colleagues, and welcome.
You have to elect vice chair as well.
So, as a chair,
Yes. All right.
Councillor Rathbone, I will elect a vice chair. But thank you, Councillor Rathbone, just to make sure the meeting is working in the right way. So, thank you, colleagues, for nominating me as chair. It's a great pleasure to be able to chair the Constitution meeting. I would like to ask for nominations for vice chair, please.
Can I nominate Councillor Gordon?
Thank you. And I second that. So, excellent. So, congratulations, Councillor Gordon, in being vice chair. Any apologies for absence? I haven't received any.
No apologies.
No apologies. Okay. Do members have any declarations of interest? The only thing that I would say, if we reference the Local Government Association at any point, I am one of their deputy vice chair of the LGA Cross Party Board, but I don't see that being an issue, but want to just raise that anyway. Any other declarations of interest? So for members that were present, item number 4, can we ask you to agree the minutes of the Constitution that took place on the 13th of April 22?
Agreed.
Great. Thank you. And then we're going to move on to item 5. And I want to invite Sonia Khan to introduce the report on ward forums, which is a really important part of what we do as local councillors. Some of our ward forums are thriving, some may just need a little bit of a change in how they're run, but it's a real opportunity for the general public to meet with their local ward councillors, have people along to discuss issues that are important to them in their community. Sonia, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to give an update on ward forums. I should be clear that this isn't a strategic review of ward forums. We don't really go into the potential that ward forums could have if we looked at a different approach. It's just a for information item on how they're currently set up and how they're currently supported. With that refreshed information, then the Constitution Committee might want to ask us to do some more work in due course, but I just wanted to provide the scene setting to begin with. So just to be clear, ward forums were placed in neighbourhood committees in 2014, and at the time they sat within a separate service, which was the Scrutiny and Ward Forum Service. But in 2016, Scrutiny team, due to restructure, came to report into my service, which was Policy and Partnerships. I'm now head of Policy and Strategic Delivery, and Scrutiny and Ward Forums still sit within the service. But I actually, even before that, was involved in the setup and development and was a volunteer officer supporting one of the Ward Forums from 20. We put, and Tracy Anderson is the key senior officer. She sends her apologies today. She has living in Hackney this evening, so I said that I would cover this fully. So in the Constitution, we've included what's covered there, so that it's an opportunity for effective engagement between ward councils and local citizens, as you say, Chair, and to look at local discussions and ways to develop taking forward issues. And it's a real opportunity for ward members to show that a community leadership role, which has been such a key role, driven, by local government association and other bodies, to look at that role beyond the role of being an elected member and having constituents whose cases you take on and maybe have individual relationships with. So when ward forums were originally set up in 2014, they had a named linked officer. That was never something that was funded. We relied on the goodwill of officers to do this on top of their day job. So, as I say, I was involved in that and did that for a couple of years. The problem that we found, which those who've been around for some time will know, is that in the last 5-6 years, particularly around 2016-17, there were a series of organisational restructures and a shrinking of the organisation at the time. And actually that model became unviable, and I can testify for that. I certainly couldn't find the capacity any longer. to do something in the day job, because the day job went in, you know, I was working longer and longer hours and not getting through even a fraction of the work. So how could we then give up time? So that was the case. And so we took the decision to move to a different model of support, which I recognise is, you know, is difficult because it does put more onus on members to organise meetings with some central support from Tracy and her team. So the current offer and support, it sits within Tracy Anderson's remit, and she reports to me. We talk about ward forums, it's a standing item in our fortnightly meetings, and we look at both the resourcing issues, particular risks around particular topics, and also just look back at the topics. And actually, as a head of policy, that's really useful for me to get that, you know, insight every fortnight, because it feeds into wider understanding of insight, policy, of community insight, and that's really helpful. So it's very valuable that we do that. So the planning goes to Tracy, and she's the key point of contact. And then if there's an event, if there's a meeting that we think is going to generate a lot of interest from residents, then we work closely with the service that's most closely implicated, but we also, I will deploy people from my team. And so we've had situations where I've deployed, you know, 2 or 3 other officers to support a meeting. But a lot of the meetings happen without an officer, other than an officer who may be speaking to an item. So they are organised by ward members. And the support that's provided is set out there. It's practical support, particularly around marketing and publicity and meeting bookings. And to support that, there is a budget which works out roughly about £900 per ward forum per year. So there's a budget that we can draw down to support that. There's no compulsory cycle, but we were at members' marketplace, the showcase, a few last month, and we were very much, I think Tracy was having a lot of conversations with members about ward forums, and an email went out. We decided to launch the offer on the same day as that marketplace, so an email went out. During COVID, there's in the appendix information about the meetings that happened. You can see there were fewer, but for those members who wanted to touch base with residents, it provided a key link. But, you know, we also have to recognise that there was a lot of place-based work during COVID, and that there were a lot of, you know, areas that have taken a different direction with the place-based meetings, the locality-based meetings, town hall style meetings. So we do need to take that on board. We can't just pretend the world hasn't changed around us. So as we come out, next steps, I am keen to look at the potential impact that ward forums could have if they're aligned more with other work within my service, where we have place-based work, but also whether this could sit somewhere else and add value and have greater impact. But the issue, Chair, is going to come back to a matter of resources and prioritisation, because the model that we've got here is scalable. It is, you know, like during the pandemic, we didn't have many ward forums. Prior to the pandemic, we were looking at several every few weeks. So if I can't scale up, and if this went anywhere else, the same issue, it'd be the same case. There wouldn't be a way of scaling up the level of officer capacity unless a conscious decision was made to prioritise this. So in the meantime, we do have to come up with a light touch model that is scalable based on one officer being able to work with 5 a year, or 20 a year, or 60 a year. If every area wanted to have 63, 3 ward forums. So you can see the challenge there. I just wanted to be upfront and honest about that. But I think there is potential even within the current resource model. And I did start a conversation within my service about this and with communication with comms colleagues. But we were, it was between wave 1 and wave 2 of the pandemic. And then we went into a full pandemic response, which, as many of you will be aware, a lot of corporate centre were heavily involved in driving. So, we had to pull back. But I'm keen to look at that again. So I'll end there, Chair, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Do colleagues have any questions or comments? Councillor Rathbone.
Thanks very much. I'd like to say thank you to officers who have helped us down the years, as it were, and have given their time to not only just attend the meeting, but also setting up the meeting, actually taking the notes as well. You know, very much appreciated it. And even now, with, as you're kind of saying, it's scaled down, still welcome the support. I mean, we've had 2 ward forums in the last couple of years where the leaflet has gone through the doors. I mean, one was very important, wasn't it, to do with a road assessment change. So I'm very happy, but I just wonder if we could maybe help councillors by explaining more about it. I know I hear from colleagues, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that, to which my answer is correct. Yes, you do. I do my notes and so on. You have to set the meeting up yourself now. You have to do that. But actually the leaflet is probably the best one, because that is actually a cost, isn't it? So I mean, I really much appreciate it, and I do appreciate what officers have done. And just to say, it's really a question. I know this is only a reporting back, but I think we kind of lost where to put the reports of the ward forums. I don't know if it's still on the website. Maybe it is, and I've missed it. But it would be good if it was somewhere. And I mean, even the summary that you've just given there, though it's very brief, it does actually say we had a ward forum and it was discussing on how traffic in the area between Median Road, etc. So if there could be somewhere, or whether it's there and we just not spotted it on the website, would be, I think, useful for residents, wouldn't it? Residents to look back to see we are doing this and we are consulting you. Actually, here is the evidence.
Really helpful, thank you. Councillor Wilson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, thank you very much, Sonia, for the report, with the analysis of where we are at the moment with ward forums. I mean, I think, the new administration, should be an opportunity at some point, really, I think, to maybe sort of have a deeper dive really into how these function. And I think it would be very useful to survey members as well as officers about the sort of impact for it. I mean, obviously, it's quite a useful point really in relation to the policy areas, as you highlighted. I think we can, look at the sort of effective use of sort of communications and technology, as well as really sort of important points that Councillor Rathbone made in relation to sort of reporting back and publicising things. I think it would be, I think it's probably, we're going to be saying something fairly sort of broad brush about ward forums as part of constitutional committee, so it's probably sort of outside the remit of this. But I think it would be really useful during the, the administration to have a research and a review, a proper review of how this fits. And also, I think just to comment really, I think it's incredible how the head of scrutiny, who has an extremely important and busy day job, manages to do this as well. I really don't know how she manages to do it so cheerfully. So I think it's it's very, a very, very significant ask of, got a senior officer. So I'd say that as well. So.
Thank you. Both valuable comments by my colleagues, and just want to reiterate my thanks for the work officers do around this. And I think that between us, Sonia, we can get something round to all members just to set out what's available, what support looks like, what officers are there to do and what they can facilitate, and as local ward councillors, what between the 3 of us or 2 of us, if it's a 2-member ward, what expectations there are for us, because we are best placed to do some of that work, because we understand the wards and we know, we'll know what community halls are available, for example, and know who will answer and those sorts of practical things. And we also know when we'll need the ward forums, because we understand the issues that are being raised in our community. So if we can make that as an action point really for Sonia and I, just to get a briefing note that we can cascade to councillors on this. Councillor, yes, Councillor Felton.
Chair, and thanks for the update. I just wondered if you had any data on the average attendance at ward forums, and also on the mechanism for feeding into policy areas. I'm afraid we did, some years ago in Kings Park, we did have ward forums, but they hadn't happened for at least 2 years, to my knowledge, so.
That's right. I mean, there's been a variety. Some have kept continuity in terms of ward forums and have gone online. Other wards didn't. It just depends on the ward and the members and what was happening. But I think through the pandemic, different wards were finding different ways to engage with the residents, depending on the level of the need or what the community was saying they needed from ward councillors at the time. Because I know some people did group surgeries, for example, online with community groups as a way forward, and also I think as well in some wards, I know from some of our residents and speaking to them, some people didn't want that kind of big scale kind of coming together, even if it was on Zoom at the time, because of what they were going through. So that's fine if it wasn't happening, but now there's an opportunity to reset that we're having those meetings accordingly. We all understand what support is there and what we will be having to do and lead on in terms of our role as ward councillors. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Shall I respond to the questions that have been raised?
Yes.
Yeah. So Councillor Rathbone, just to say there is still a web link. It's probably changed because of the cyber attack and the fact that everything was linked to modern.gov. So it's actually now just on the council business page, but it doesn't have notes. But I think that's more to do with the fact that there is no need to keep notes and publish them. So it varies whether people have them or not. But there is all the meetings that have happened over the last year are published. And if you go on to how to get involved, if you go on to different places in the website, they'll all directly to that same page. So that's a simple answer. I think there's more we could do to think about, but that's just a simple response for now. In terms of resources, I do recognise that it's an extra pressure on a member of staff who's already got 2 commissions, and that is something that I'm aware of, but she's keen to keep the role, and obviously doesn't do all the administration herself. So there is support from the wider service, and also she deploys support from the team. But it, as I say, it is something that I will be looking at again in terms of how this can be best supported. The problem is it will remain the model, because if it went to anybody else, it would be the same fraction of time. The service is very pressured with a lot of live issues, as well as the ongoing policy and strategy work. And when we looked at the option of this going to other services, they didn't want to take it on without the resources, you can imagine. And I can understand, I think don't want to focus all on resources. I think with the light touch model we've got, we focus on community leadership and how we can work dynamically with members. I think we can still do a lot, especially because we can plug into wider resources within the team and within the community engagement, within Polly's area as well. So then, in terms of the Council Bramble Chair, your question about marketing. So Tracy has done a push out. It might help if it came from you. So I could ask Tracy to liaise with your office about whether it would help for something to go from you to set the tone as well. But we could run a workshop. I'd be really keen to meet the new group of members and discuss what this might mean for them. And just give them ideas by listening to the examples that have come up over the last couple of years and before of how they can work. And I would encourage people to get beyond the idea that it has to be a very committee style meeting. Sometimes that's what residents want, in all honesty, and they want to see the notes. But actually, the more it can be linked to local issues and be a really interactive session that is very much about ward members' community leadership role, I think it can have more impact. We did do a survey before the pandemic. We didn't get that much engagement. So I think if we did some work to promote this through the deputy mayor, to then market the offer again and the need, the imperative to do something, and then linked it to a workshop session, and then had a follow-up survey. So people have got piqued their interest, because the survey didn't get that many responses, and the insight wasn't that helpful either. at the time, but I think we might be in a different place now if we took that approach. So I'm happy for that to be noted as a suggested action for me to follow up with Tracy. Number. To be honest, that was something that we monitored more carefully, and during the pandemic, there is a million average. Some of the numbers have been driven by a particular contentious or live issue, and then some have been much quieter, depending whether it's live or in a virtual setting. So we have dropped the ball on really looking at what that means, because it hasn't been that meaningful coming out of the pandemic and going into more face-to-face settings, as well as continuing to do virtual where they work. We will pick that up, and how it informs policy and insight. In the past, pre-pandemic, we had a way of, there was a lot more detail on the spreadsheet, and then we would look at that as colleagues who were looking, or me, looking at moments where we needed to look at insight. So if we were developing aging well strategy, or any point we needed to look at insight, that would be part of the body of insight. But obviously, it also helps that I have those fortnightly sessions where we look at issues. So I'm aware, it feeds straight into my thinking as head of policy, as well as into more structured, systematic ways of looking at insight. Now we have a community impact assessment as a policy and strategy team. We developed it during the pandemic, where we have a way of being able to systematically pull in all insight along with quantitative data. And so moving forward, we can then use that as another insight, along with what the voluntary and community sector send us, along with the qualitative work that's done by But again, it could be part of the topic for a workshop, to actually say, how do we make sure that what you get on the ground from these ward forums feeds in, especially because we don't have an officer listening in. And actually some of the insight isn't just about what is said, but how it's said, what the dynamics are, whether there's a good positive feeling in the room, or whether there's a lot of stress and anxiety or tension between residents. So we can't get that other than by capturing your observations of what's happened on the.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And yeah, I suppose that's what I was sort of alluding to, Sonia, that you and I kind of construct something, draft something that can then come from me. I think we can resend the survey out with it. I don't think it's hurtful if it's sent out again. You might get some more responses. Equally, as because we now have new members, I think it would be helpful to recirculate that survey. We might want to think about, a good thing about the workshop, if we do it, might want to think about a template that we can pull together that has where you put the actions, the themes, mood, any resolve that happened within the meeting, so that it's not laborious on any one person that's filling out that form. Especially with me, I know with me, I do take copious notes, but then I kind of, because I have dyslexia, sometimes I take too long fussing about spelling and things, but actually a simple template that could be a practical outcome of that workshop that we had around ward forums, I think would be really helpful. So actions are workshop, a letter out from me about the changes, a date. We can get really coordinated. We have the date in that, and we're going to recirculate the survey. Any other questions or comments on this item?
Sorry, Chair.
Sonia.
I'm not sure about the survey because it was pre-pandemic and it might have.
Well, we can tweak it. We can tweak it. Yeah. No, we can definitely tweak it, but actually I think it might be helpful for us to gauge what people are thinking, feeling before we have the workshop, because that will better shape the workshop drop-in that we're having, rather than get that information and maybe have to go back. So, okay, great.
Chair, as committee, could we see the survey beforehand?
I think that'd be a really helpful suggestion. That's really helpful. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments, queries? And you have all the actions? Excellent. So thank you so much, Sonia, for your attendance. We're going to move on to item 6. Can I hand over to Louise to talk about terms of reference and the programme of work?
Thank you, Chair. I won't continue too long with this report that we produced at the next report to the farming subject this evening. So this members will be aware that normally every year when a committee presents, it relates to terms of reference is being set for that committee. And with this instance, we are proposing that you defer doing that until your next meeting for the reason that full council next week there will be a small proposed amendment to those terms of reference to increase membership of this committee to both opposition groups. So pending council's decision on that proposal, it's in slight opportune moment to note your terms. If any terms change, you have to do it in September again or October again anyway. So we're proposing that and deferred. And then the second thing that committees normally do is look at the proposed work programme for the year. Unsurprisingly, most of the proposed work programme is to do with the revisions to the Constitution, and you'll see from counting the appendix where we're proposing to do certain parts to you. Clearly, if you have a view on can we reorder some of these parts, we will do our best to accommodate this. So if there's parts that you would wish to see earlier than others, we can do that. At the moment, we have parts 1 and 2 consideration tonight. So if there is to be any change before we, as an officer working group, launch ourselves into parts 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you were to say to me, want to see 7, 8, and 9 first, then I'd like to know the 15 minute capital, please, in order to make sure that we like for ourselves. Other than that, Chair, nothing to add.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Any comments or queries? And I welcome the opportunity for us to decide for council and then in terms of reference to extending to all party groups. So we're going to move on to item 7 on the agenda. So just to set a little bit of context for new members, that this has been an important piece of work, and previously how we have discussed the Constitution has been through discussions in the members' reference group, from suggestions from members and officers. I will say that it's been really helpful to have that working group filled with lawyers. I must admit, I think that I can be quite pedantic and feel a bit geekish sometimes, but then when lawyers take over, I think I'm not alone, and their careful eye to go over documents with precision I have welcomed, and it has been a testament to where we've been so far. Some of those changes have helped us to refresh the council's position scheme, amending motions and clarifying procedures for the alteration of budget. Now, all of those things may sound very boring and laborious, but actually it makes what we do in this council really more engaging and actually, I think, quite dynamic. I spoke to Dawn, the monitor officer, and Louise at some time ago, and one of the things that we all felt that was important to have is a regular update of the Constitution, because prior to Dawn taking over the role and Louise being in her new role, that wasn't there. So that was the first thing that we did. And then after all of that systematic change and review, one of the things that I thought is that why don't we have the Constitution Committee and make it public facing? Because actually we want the public to know that we're here for open challenge and transparency. And the reason why we're doing this work is that we want the public to read these documents and find it more engaging. But why we need to do that by tidying it up. So we're not ripping up the Constitution, we're not changing anything to let the community have less powers. What we are doing is changing this document so that anyone that wants to engage in what we do, or even find out what they do, they can understand it in the most simplest and purest terms. Because I can say, someone that's close to this, even sometimes I have to recheck and sense check, and I just have to wonder, am I really understanding this here? And I know that possibly councillors that are lawyers, ex-lawyers, work with law firms, they might find it easier to move through. But actually, we want someone that isn't close to the Constitution, that doesn't have a background in this, to be able to access this as easily as people that do. And that is absolutely why we are here. And the last thing that I'd say is that we were one of the first councils, if not the first council in the pandemic, to go on live with our council cabinet meetings, because we wanted to engage with the public. Changing this helps us do that even more. So that's why we're here today. So I just thought for new members, it was important to give that context, and this is an opportunity for me to thank the officers and councillors that dedicated their time to get us to this point. So on that note, we will now start going through the document. So So we start in the very beginning by doing a page turn, and then if people don't have any general comments, we can just ask for general comments. Is that a good way forward? Okay. So if we start on page 33, can you have a look through of that page? Check. Councillor Gordon.
Sorry, Chair. I was just say we're looking at parts 1 and 2. We're not looking at more than that.
No, I put parts 1 and 2
Yeah.
just for today.
Yeah, so that's the.
Yes, then they're going to have before you part 1 and 2. You'll see from the papers that as we need to divide in the parts into various sections to try and make the document easier to navigate for future use of it. Which is possibly the key benefits as we see it to how people access and use it as engagement. Hence why we sort of we're taking a very much more modular, if I can use the word, approach to it, with the view that when, for example, our constitution is published on the website in due course, we will be able to publish it in parts, so that people will be able to go straight to the part that they are interested in without having to trawl through the whole document. But conversely, we'll also have the full document available. So if that's the way that they want to engage with it, we have a copy and download the copy and do word searches through the whole document, then that's the way that they can do that. So it's all about giving people options. So the part 1 is what we are proposing you now call your council, as opposed to the introduction, to make it a bit more expansive, where you can find information about your council. With section 8 being an overview of the borough, that is predominantly lifted from the existing part 1. Albeit hopefully with our very dedicated officer working group looking at the language of it to try and use plain English wherever we can use plain English, use bulleted lists where we think that will be helpful for people. And one of our colleagues is doing this online this evening, is who we affectionately call guru on things plain English. So we've been really careful about looking at the wording that we are using. I don't claim that we don't have things perfectly. So hence, this is why your comments are so important. So if we feel that there are, we can actually help with a organogram here that we currently have in our existing part. We think that would be useful. Where we link into the council's website, those links will be inserted later, as I should point out, all cross-referencing your bit. Because at the moment, if we decide we want to move part, having to go back through and then recheck all of the cross-referencing, one of the last things that you do with the document of this size is to put those references in. Hence why you'll see lots of references to part X, section X, to make sure that we can do those as we go.
Okay, that's really helpful, and I think that I know when I was speaking to Councillor Alden, I know she had already been through the document, and I suppose there's a way as well for us to have comments beforehand, even before, and just raise them here as well. Because, for example, we might all go through page 2 through 4 and think there's nothing, and start from page 4. So in the future, if we go straight, no one has.
Yeah. Absolutely, we're very
point.
much in your hands as to how you want this work to progress when we come to committee.
Yeah.
And obviously, starting at page 1 of the constitution, doing a page turn. But as we go, we're learning as we go, because we don't have a constitution to be before. There may be other ways of doing this that work better for you as members. And please don't be afraid to say, actually, we would prefer it if we could do it in this way.
Yeah. So on 1.2, would it be helpful to have a link there to people to be able to find their councillors or not? So I know there's another, I'm sure elsewhere people will find out where their ward councillors is.
I think
But
that's in 1.3 maybe. It might be better.
1.3, I'm happy.
I think it's missing wards there as well.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, I agree. Could I just say thank you very much, Louise, for doing, I don't know who it was, did the comparator.
Yeah, me.
It wasn't you.
It was the, yes.
It was absolutely brilliant. I've never seen anything like that before. It worked really well.
Well, that's the other complicating factor is as we're doing this, again, you know, as officers, I appreciate we've got the existing part, we've got what we're proposing, and then sometimes it's not always easy to see where the changes are.
Yeah.
And certainly, sometimes you can find if you're trying to do all the comments in the document that you're producing, then you can't see the wood for the trees in the document when you're trying to just read it as a document. And it becomes really complicated. So we thought we would give the comparator option on Adobe Go and see where that got us.
Yes.
Again, very much trial and error. So if people like it, they'll continue to do it. And if it didn't provide any difference, then obviously we won't.
Yeah.
I think that works well. So any comments for page that would be labelled 30?
Yes. So I had an additional comment, Chair, if I may, on 1.6. Yeah, so this is the sort of, I suppose really a question really, this is a list of sort of core responsibilities of the elected mayor and councillors. Is that, I mean, it does seem to me that it's missing something about promoting equality among citizens.
Absolutely.
You know, whether reference to protected characteristics or so.
Yes, that is missing, isn't it?
I think it may be, I think it also, for clarity, I think it'd be helpful in 1.6 if there was maybe some sort of subheading saying that these are core duties and responsibilities, but obviously the elected mayor and councillors have, you know, I mean, there's a number of other references in the Constitution to councillors' responsibilities that are not in that very clearly, but I think it's sort of, it maybe needs to clarify what this is and then sort of reaching out to press the document, if that makes sense.
So let's go on to 30, that's 33, 34. I don't know if it's helpful, because you don't want to make it too long all the time, but I don't know, is it a good idea to put an example of something the speaker might do in terms of an event? Because if you don't really, if you've never sort of understood or thought of anyone in an ambassador role, I'm not sure if that sentence tells you what a speaker does. Does anyone reading that know that actually if you've got a fete that you want someone to attend or a community building you want to launch, does that sentence tell you that speaker's someone to invite?
No, it doesn't.
No. So I think
Yes, I think
just need a little bit more of example of.
I just wondered about, maybe I'm being a bit finicky here, but the first citizen, I wondered if that should be in kind of inverted commas. You know, it's
Yes, so 1.7 you need a for example, a speaker may.
Yes,
then
we'll come up with some examples.
Great, and then what I think you're right in inverted commas, that's right.
so I just wondered if we, in giving examples, to say that maybe it's in connection with being an ambassador, welcomes visitors from elsewhere to the town hall and to the borough. Yeah,
that's really good, because I don't think people know that they can come and look around or even know about the archives. That'd be really good. Okay, brilliant.
Sure. Sorry, I'm being. Actually, I realised Leeds meetings. Should that just not be chairs meetings? I'm not sure if Leeds meetings. Sorry, I'm looking at 1.7.
No, I think chairs is better.
Chairs better?
Yeah. This is one meeting that I take no apologies for people being pedantic, Councillor Rash, so feel in your element. Any other comments? People.
1.8, I mean, I wonder, I mean, whether there needs to be some reference to the mayor being directly elected. I don't think it's, I mean, if this is a sort of, I mean, there's more than one purpose, obviously, it's obviously sort of legal document, but this is also sort of an explanatory document to the public. I think that might be useful to maybe explain that a bit more.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
So you know, we reference
Yeah.
in 1.5, so we say the elect.
Yeah.
So would it be better to say it's above, because we already start to talk about the mayor there, or do you think it's better to
I think it probably maybe 1.3 or 1.5.
Yeah.
Say that the mayor is directly elected by
Yes,
all
yeah.
the voters in the borough.
Yeah.
Whereas as Walker it just
Yeah.
Yeah, the underlay. And some of this might work in paragraph form within the body of the text.
Yeah.
Some of it may be hyperlinked. The only thing about hyperlinks is people ask for a hard document. You need lots of things in the appendices, so we have to kind of think about how we navigate. Most people access to online versions for hyperlinks, but we have to think about hard copies that we need in the appendix. But
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that we were proposing that we actually bring the glossary forward. Instead of being at the end of the document, it's, it goes to the front of the document, and then one of the things that we've been mulling over as we go, in certain sections may give rise to this more than others, is that they could mini glossary after certain sections, just to give that context.
I think that's better actually. Because I think jumping backwards and forwards in a glossary kind of stops the flow.
Yeah, it's trying to make it functional work however you're trying to do it.
Yeah.
It's always been the tricky one, where do you put a glossary, which by certain sections may well give rise to that. In this section, when we're talking about this is what we mean by these terms, to sort of give that wider depth to it.
Thank you. Go on to page 35.
Um, 1.13. Scrutiny power scrutiny commissions and review and scrutinise all the council's work. I'm afraid, unfortunately, we don't have capacity to do that, but we are able to. So, so I don't want to set the bar too high.
Yeah.
I'm entitled to. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We've got overview and scrutiny. We're starting off by saying good governance. 1 point. You said what scrutiny is. I can't see it. But sometimes when we look at things more than once, that needs to be a glossary, isn't it? Yeah. Scrutiny. I suppose if you don't know what scrutiny is, you're going to have a whole paragraph of reading about it and not quite understanding what it is. And then the amendment that Gordon rightly made. Okay. 36.
Sorry, Chair. 1.17. Very wide answer. I don't know whether this. Sorry, I'm afraid I haven't, like my Councillor Rathbone, looked at the comparator. Is this a new definition, or is it? Is this sort of the usual definition? Because I just slightly uneasy about how wide it is, but I mean that may well be necessary. Just a question, really.
It is. I mean, ultimately, an officer is somebody who's employed by the council to do the work, the manner in which they're employed, whether they are agency staff or not, they're still employed by the council.
Yeah.
So that is a fairly standard definition of what an officer of the council is.
So,
Are they volunteer? Yeah, volunteers are not employed, but they're
No.
yeah. They're just it's quite yeah, because it's, I mean, it's just, it's, yeah, that's just a question, because it's obviously quite a sort of really central definition. It's used, you know, multiple times throughout the document.
Yeah.
So just, it's quite you know, there's a number of rights and duties and responsibilities attached to these individuals. So just, it's, I suppose really what I'm sort of slightly sort of, uneasy about is obviously there's a sort of variety of statuses here. So, and whether it works for all of those. So, you know, obviously, you know, very high sort of standards of duties and responsibilities of, you know, sort of employees, but it's, I mean, going down to volunteers, I mean, whether there are any sort of uses the word officer, which wouldn't work for those. I suppose that's just really my sort of question about that.
We can look at again.
Yeah.
What's included within that. That's fine.
Yeah.
On 1.19,
Yeah.
does it need to say, instead of saying this sets out, say again the Constitution sets out? So we've got the council legally required to have a Constitution. The Constitution is how, rather than this sets out. I don't know if that would work better for people.
Yeah.
In the reading and understanding.
Sorry, I've got another point on 20.
No, apologies needed.
So 1.20, the Constitution may be amended by full council and monitoring officer from time to time. It may be something I've missed later, but is that, I think obviously the distinction between, is there a level of amendment that that needs to go to full council, or is, you know, and that you don't have discretion? Yeah, I think
It's the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah.
It says what the monitoring officer can amend is specified within the Constitution.
Yeah.
Although as we come on to that part,
sure,
we'll see that we're proposing some greater clarity to that, because the current approach is a bit it's a bit too vague. And I think that it's a bit too vague for us, as when we're looking at, do we need to take this to full council? Can we make this change? But yes, so it is. So the monitoring officer may make certain changes, and anything else has to go to full council.
So I think that needs to be cross-referenced.
I think you're right, because if there are legal changes that the government said have to come into play, Dawn in her authority would amend the Constitution without consultation, because actually it's important that the any constitution reflects national legislation. So it's things like that we need to say, that actually there are times you have to amend it, and a distinction between what will go to full council or what you would amend.
Yes, and just to assist members, that's in Article 15, which is the article on review and revision of the Constitution.
Okay.
Thank you.
But we can include the cross-reference.
Yeah. Definitely. So page 37.
Sorry, Chair, but if I can just to try and again just say, so this section beyond principles of decision making is an entirely new section of the Constitution, and what we thought it was important to do again in terms of the wide range of how we take decisions as an authority, to actually be fairly, crystal clear about what are the relevant considerations when we're taking a decision, whether that's by an officer or by a councillor or by cabinet or committee, but what are our relevant considerations, so that, again, we're being completely transparent about we will take decisions in this way.
Yeah. No, I think it's just really, really helpful. I think I'm sure it's going to evolve as we sort of, but I think it's really, really helpful having this. It's good to see it actually. It's useful as well. So. We're on page 38.
Yes, we are.
So 1.10, all decisions must be made in accordance with the budget and policy framework set by the council. I think that maybe needs to sort of thinking through. So I've got a couple of so I'm really very clear. I think it sort of maybe needs sort of thinking through a bit, because that's obviously a sort of, they're going to be living documents which are going to be amended. So should it be a set sort of time from time to time? They're separate from the Constitution, if I've understood this correctly. Is that?
Yes, obviously the budget and policy framework may change depending on at what point in time a decision is made. So yeah, it will be in accordance with the budget and policy framework. I'm trying to, this won't be in very plain English, but as existing at the time of the decision.
A set by time to time.
Yeah.
It's just quite sort of ambulatory.
Yeah.
So, and just, I suppose a reference to where, somebody reading this could find that information. And I don't know whether we need any sort of tightening up about exactly what this includes, because it does seem very sort of broad as well, the budget and policy framework. I mean, do we define what that means? Is it limited to particular documents, or?
There is a section in the Constitution which deals with budget and policy framework. But again, we can ensure that we I mean, the last sentence does say, these are the policies, etc., and they're set out in this part of the Constitution. So we, there will be a cross link with where they can find, what are the documents that, obviously the budget, yes, but what are actually the policy documents? What is the core of the policy framework?
Sorry, Chair, in 111, there's a comma placed in line 2.
Sorry, yes, again?
In 111, there's a comma placed in line 2.
Yes. Yes. 39. Chair, do you want to say something about the 1.14, the sustainability and climate change? Because that's an additional. That's an addition. Yeah, that's new, isn't it? The word in there.
That is new. You're right, because in clearing climate emergencies, ensuring that everything we do going forward as a council, we're considering the sustainability or the impact of what we're doing as a council, and that sustainability doesn't sit in a directorate. It's more a way of how we deliver our services as a council. Yeah, that's important to highlight.
I mean, again, I was going to make a similar point really about sort of equalities, because it seems, our climate change declaration is, fundamentally important and fundamental as well. But it seems, I wonder whether we need something more about sort of promoting. I mean, it's obviously a duty under the Equalities Act anyway, but whether we need any sort of explicit declaration of that, I don't know what people think.
I agree. I literally before this was at a school, actually, Bridge Academy, and actually they invited me to speak at the Cultural Awareness Day, and it was beautiful to see children in Caribbean costumes, African costumes, Ukraine, people dressed up with their flag from Ukraine, and it was just really beautiful to see a school just embrace the broader community and celebrate what we talk about in Hackney. And it was just a really nice feel. And the children were so excited, and every time someone walked in with a different nationality, they were like they were welcoming royalty. It was sort of like people were really excited and said, that's really nice. And I just think you're right. We should harness that importance, Councillor Gordon, in the Constitution, and that just to make us more mindful of it, that it's not something that sits in a particular directorate or a particular officer or member that want to drive this. Is actually, as we consider our sustainability and response to climate change, we consider our place in ensuring equality and justice in all that we do as well. It's a really good point. Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
I suppose 1.15, I mean, this is obviously consultation. It's not the only reference to consultation, it's consultation in the context of decision making. Yeah, I mean, this maybe sort of point needs to be sort of thought through really. It's that, I mean, I wonder whether we need to say anything broader about, this is just sort of taking, that sufficient and necessary consultation or engagement is done in advance for decision making. I think that seems to be missing to me as well, but I don't think it ties us down to a necessary consultation. So I mean, that's obviously something that would have to be thought through. So
Yeah. Good point. It's helpful. Any other queries or comments? Go on to.
I probably like you, Margaret. I am looking at the principles of natural justice, but I decided to leave that alone.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think otherwise we could end up in an incredible discussion about it and still come back to the first point and know it for the first time kind of thing. But I just wondered if that whether it is actually defined. Maybe I thought, and then I realised in 118 it's probably defined the fair and reasonable and transparent decision making procedure is followed. Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to.
That's all right. Honestly, all contributions are helpful because we're just trying to make this more accessible. And I always think, the reflection of someone's intelligence is how simply they are able to convey a message.
Yeah.
So the more simpler the constitution is to everyone, I feel will speak to the work that we do here. So I think it's really good that we're kind of questioning, probing, rethinking what's before us. It's all helpful. 40 and 41.
again, maybe just a sort of general point about, I suppose, just stress testing this against all, areas it's going to apply, because obviously, there's a lot of decisions made by the council. So, yeah.
Okay. 42 and 43.
No, again, I like this. I think this is really useful to have this set out. Thank you. See if it's,
Yeah, I think that's really good. Because I think that's the balance, isn't it? This is your rights and this is your responsibility. I think it's so good.
In 1.3, the final point about ensuring that children attend the school, I think that has to be will receive education. Don't you know? It's not. There is another. Yeah.
Yeah.
Education.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Because they could be homeschooled. Yeah.
And 1.4. I think that the first sentence was saying in relation in their dealings with the council or officers.
Yes.
Because obviously, as citizens, we've got loads of other ways. But it's more narrow than that, isn't it? We've obviously got further duties and controls. So,
We need to make
about how we behave. So.
Okay, 45.
Yeah, sorry, just going back on 1.1, And the kind of opening paragraph there on page 42, citizens used to, in this document, describe everyone who lives or works in the London Borough of Hackney, but not everybody who lives in Hackney is necessarily a citizen. Are we somewhere describing what a citizen is? Because not everybody who is even a citizen can vote in some elsewhere in some.
Sorry about that. Am I in the right place? This is constitutional data. I'm in the wrong place.
You're always welcome to come and observe, Councillor Allen.
Yes, Councillor, the sort of the definition of a citizen, of what we call a citizen, is something that's been causing us at the IPSA working group quite a lot of conversation about how do we define what we mean. I mean, practically every local authority constitution talks about citizens. But what actually do we mean by a citizen is actually a bit more complicated than that. So it is something that's been exercising our brains quite a bit. So I'm by no means sure that we have the definition of what we mean by a citizen absolutely perfectly. It's trying to encapsulate, because obviously, yes, you know, if you're talking about somebody who works in the borough, well, no, you don't have a right to vote because you're not on the electoral roll. Hence why there's certain men.
Yes.
You break it down a bit further, so if you're on the electoral roll, but you vote. But it's yes, I really, you know, hold my hands up to you. Don't necessarily got that quite right yet.
I think maybe on the electoral roll, after that, I think some qualification has to be made, unless you are a citizen, unless you have come from another country or something that may restrict you in the voting, something like that. But I agree, yeah. So I know I'm treading in.
Continue to roll that one over.
Yeah.
And I think it Chair, I was going to add, just taking that point a bit further. It was just making sure that we really get the explanation of the way in which we're using the word citizen, so that we're not excluding those persons who may see themselves as being a citizen because they live in the borough.
Yeah.
So it's quite it's a sensitive. I think it's a sensitive. Of how far we go in terms of explanations, because we wouldn't want to be seen to be excluding anyone just by virtue of a definition which we are grappling with. So I take your point, Councillor Rathbone, but it's getting the right sensitivities.
Yes.
Whilst at the same time trying to make sure that we're sitting within a legal explanation. So, for example, you know, the voting point, voting at local elections and referenda, if they are registered as an elector on the electoral roll.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and entitled to under the general law as well.
Yes.
Yeah, because there are some exclusions.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So just.
But then the question, plain devil's advocate, the question could be, well, then am I not a citizen because I can't vote?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Because
age 18, for instance, or
yeah,
if I'm unable to vote, for instance, yes.
yeah,
That's a really good point.
yeah. So
So it's 1968.
yeah,
I mean, it could say rights of citizens can include or something, but just it's or maybe we need a different word. I don't know.
Yes, well, we were also contemplating, you know, ultimately whether citizen is actually the right word.
Yeah.
And people obviously recognise the citizen as being of a country as opposed to not necessarily a smaller area. But then trying to think what the alternative word would be is whenever, you know, practically every constitution you look at uses the term citizen and uses it in that context. Then it's the modular. It was way back to when constitutions were first came into being. It was the word in the modular constitution that came from you know, all of the work that's put in, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily right now. But it's just that, you know, it's that really the word,
Yeah.
a better word.
Yeah, because it's broader than residents, stakeholders, not, you know.
Yeah, no, it's not the word I'd want to
It's
use.
not attractive word, yes. Yeah, Councillor Troughton?
Could I suggest that the opening paragraph, instead of saying this section explains some of the rights and responsibilities of citizens, actually makes a statement about what a citizen is and says something like, our citizen includes everyone who lives, works or visits the London Borough of Hackney.
Mm.
And then we capture everybody and we make it clear that it is all inclusive. And then explain that, you know, citizens who are eligible to register to vote, because not all citizens are eligible to register to vote. If they don't live in the borough, they're not eligible to be on our electoral roll. You know, we approach it from that point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the opening statement.
Yeah.
At least that
Because
way.
even if they're, you know, passing through,
Yes.
you know, we would still regard them with all the rights of someone with, you know, the rights of any citizen in the borough. So
Yes, and we can think of, you know, a sentence, which in a sense is all
encompassing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and we'll bring that back. Thank you.
Okay. So I think going on to part 2, see how far we can get in the absence of the chair. So page 45. So any comments on that? Again, I thought it was quite a helpful explanation. It's quite
Yeah.
it's got in the constitution. So
Yes, I mean, it just again, by way of just background, in terms of the articles, we're not seeking to change any of the articles per se. It is trying to provide greater clarity and change the language that we're using where possible to try and not bamboozle with you know, legalistic jargon terminology. You know, it's we're back to those plain English principles.
Yes.
yeah.
I'm on page 45. So should we look at 46 and 47?
Sorry.
Or are there any comments on 45? Any more comments on 45?
Yeah, on 45, I know what this means, where it says ensure that halfway down on the purpose, ensure that no one will review or scrutinise a decision in which they were directly involved. But I wonder if somebody from public necessarily understand what that might mean. Well, that could be explained, maybe in terms of personal interest or personal involvement, something. Which I think directly involved is probably a little bit more what we say, isn't it, than usually said in ordinary language.
Okay. So 46 and 47. Chair, just to make sure 46, if you do a look at the sort of comparison with the existing article, you'll see that that actually repeated a lot of what was contained in Part 1, Section C about rights and responsibilities.
Yes.
And even from, you know, those rights were again listed in the introduction to our current constitution. So we took the view, and again, I'm grateful for your opinions on this, that there seemed to be very little point in repeating ourselves. Let's just cross-refer. But if you think that it would be more accessible to people to have that repetition, then we can reinstate that wording again.
What do colleagues think?
I'm not sure I followed that, to be quite honest.
So in the current article on the citizens, one of the things it does do is go back through and say citizens have the right to X and A, B, C, D, and E. Citizens' responsibilities are they A, B, D, and C. But when you've already explained that in your introduction to your constitution, it is repetitive. To then restate it. So we took the view that let's have it in our section on citizens' rights and responsibilities,
Yeah.
and just cross-refer back to this is where you have rights and responsibilities. This is where you find out within the Constitution what your rights and responsibilities are, as opposed to having that bulleted list repeated again.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that was perfect.
Yeah, I get
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
46 and 47.
And again, I think 2.4, it says citizens have the right to. I think that sort of sets an expectation that, you know, I was looking at it, for example, with a co-opted member. I mean, not everyone has the right to become a co-opted member. So I think citizens, the rights of citizens include something where appropriate. It's not going to be automatic that every citizen can, you know, can access everything listed. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, for example, I can't go and participate in enhanced TRA if I'm don't live in the estate.
Yeah, Yes, we need some qualifying language.
Yeah.
Very legalistic parlance. We need a qualifying statement.
Yeah.
Sorry, on the 2.6, citizens have the right to. Yeah, so I mean, maybe I'm being a bit fussy, but it's saying right to complain in writing, make a complaint to the ombudsman. I'm just wondering if we could make it clear about that you could phone in or use in some other way, some other method apart from writing. Yeah.
You can contact by. Yeah.
Contact by. It's helpful.
48 and 49.
Again, just more information, and we may need to review the language. We have reflected on the fact that the current constitution simply talks about opposition group, and doesn't necessarily reflect those councils as we now are, where there's more than one opposition group, and how we're going to refer to the opposition groups as depending on their size, because opposition groups may have rights to do things, but that may depend upon who is the largest opposition group. So it's about that language of how we're going to refer to our opposition groups. So we came up with principal opposition and minority opposition. Whether that terminology is quite fixed and right. We usually have some views, and hopefully when I appreciate this evening we don't have any members of the opposition with us. To reflect upon any thoughts that they might have on that.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I thought they were contributions and comments.
Yeah.
I noticed in the agenda for full council, the Greens are put down as minority opposition, aren't they? I was interested to see that.
Yeah.
See what they might think about that.
Yeah, we have explained. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason behind that has been explained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as with all of these things, you know, once we've looked at it here, we're by no means as officer saying, right, this is now it concluded. We can come back around, because we do appreciate that not all members will always be able to make every meeting while we're looking at things.
And have we looked at wording in other councils where they have more than one opposition group to look at their terminology, and if so, has that been helpful?
That's partly where the principal opposition group came from, as in the way to reference your opposition group with the largest number of members on it. They were slightly more wordy when they were trying to describe opposition groups who had less than not the biggest opposition group, the smaller opposition groups, and then the wording got very convoluted. So again, we were trying to come up with something that was a bit plainer.
Yes.
But
yes.
Chair, we have been in this position before when Lib Dems held seats on the council, so perhaps just look back on, see how they were referred to then.
Good point.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, there's, you know, I mean, there's obviously, one opposition group has got more councillors, but the other opposition group, you know, had more votes. So yeah, and I think those are other issues that yeah, really effective.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I did think first and sort of like the first opposition group, second opposition group, but I'm not sure about that. I mean, the thing is, it's the word minority, as it were, has a bit of a derogatory meaning,
Yeah,
but it's not. It's a technical reference, isn't
Yeah,
it, to a
yeah.
smaller
yes,
group?
you have
Yes,
majority
yeah.
group, minority group.
yes, yeah.
I mean, that is peculiarly local government language, it's government language, isn't it?
Might be
Yeah.
like larger and smaller, but larger and smaller. But I mean, I suppose there's got to be future proof to those two groups.
Yes, but that then becomes
Yeah.
yeah, and that was when the language in other constitutions got even worse, when they were talking about two opposition groups that actually had the same number of seats.
Yeah.
Oh goodness!
Yeah, so
Yeah. But and I think very much this this does need to be discussed with the opposition.
I think so.
The
I think
opposition
you're,
groups, and you know, it's not right to.
I think you're right. And your example of when we had two opposition groups before councillor, to look back at that language is good as well. So let's look at 50 and 51. '52 and 53. Let me know if I'm going at the right
and
place.
that, just to flag, obviously this is part of where we describe what the policy framework documents are, because on page 52,
Yeah.
and 50 going into 53.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just jump back up to 3.8, so just to reference Councillor Gordon's earlier point about the election of the mayor. Maybe we could shift the word in here
Yeah.
to an earlier point in the constitution, so then it's an easier reference point than just have a sentence here. Yeah, that would make sense to bring that forward, actually, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think, I think it's, you know, one of the sort of fundamental questions a citizen looking, you know, a citizen or whatever language you use looking at the constitution will be, you know, who's the decision maker, how are they accountable, how do they get there? So just it's quite easier.
And the earlier it is in the document,
Yeah.
then the easier it is to understand the rest of the information that's coming around decision making.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Right. So we've done 52, 53, anything on 54?
Sorry, on 53, I was fussing around in my mind about as recommended by the Secretary of State, because that seemed like, you know, that's just a government. I don't know whether we might need to explain more why it's Secretary of State or who the Secretary of State is. Actually, people might not realise it's a government minister.
Yeah, in
A central government.
4.7.
Yeah.
B.
Yeah, and see, by I probably trying to start full council would end up with more paragraphs, but I don't know whether it would be as decided by a full council of councillors or something that helps people to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've mentioned full council earlier on in the document, so I put on mine like that needs a hyperlink to explain what full council is.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's good. Yeah.
So we'll do it back earlier on in the document.
Yeah.
So we'll do a word search. Let's start the file.
Yeah.
Let's do page 55.
Chair, I'm really sorry, I'm going to actually.
That's all right,
Yeah.
that's fine, that's
Yeah.
well done, thank you for.
Just to say, councillor, if there are any points after the meeting, please do drop us an email. Please don't think that, I mean, obviously the purpose of this is to have a public forum discussion that's available for members of the public if they're interested to watch us live or not. But please do drop us an email if there's any other points that you want us to consider afterwards.
We can review them.
Yeah.
Okay, so 56 and 57. '58 and '59.
Just back at 55, I was looking at before, statutory deputy mayor, so yourself. Yeah, of course, you're statutory. But I just wondered if, because what I understand it to mean is that if the mayor is not there, then you are the mayor. I don't know whether that needs to be said, so that people understand what that word statutory means.
True.
Yes, and we do talk about on page 56, there's a section about the inability of the elected mayor to act and then what happens if they can't. And also what actually happens if both the elected mayor and our statutory deputy mayor are similarly unable to act for whatever reason, and then what happens.
Councillor Gordon takes that.
But yes, we use the language statutory deputy mayor because we obviously have two councillors designated as deputy mayor.
Yes.
You want obviously the statutory deputy mayor, but we also have deputy mayor Nicholson. So we have to try and distinguish between the two.
Yeah. I think it's principally explaining the word statutory as it was, so that people know. Sure. Okay, yep, so.
That's all right, I'll go back to 58, 59. We can go on to
I think a case for capitalising the statutory in that situation.
Yeah.
Thank you. 60 and 61.
Yeah. No, we thought about it there, we hadn't gone back and put it back in the inadvertent speech after the before. Yeah, there we go.
'62 and '63.
Sorry, I haven't,
Right.
been taking 61 actually. isn't it? But again, I think we need to explain overview and scrutiny. If they reference I've missed what it means.
No, I don't think you've missed it. I think I referenced that at the very early.
Yeah.
I referenced that at the beginning when we started talking about scrutiny and thinking people may not necessarily have encountered scrutiny.
Inconsistency in language between commission and committee.
One.
Yeah.
So, no.
Just 7 put words because
Yeah.
commission have been scrutiny. Yeah.
Definitely say commission, not committee.
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, I think that comes from the statutory language because they talk about committees in the Government Act. It's probably connected with a bit of C,
Yeah.
and then potentially reference that we form our scrutiny, the committee, we have the panel, and then we have the commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go in a minute, but I think
Right.
it would just sort of would benefit this process actually if this was also reviewed by scrutiny panel, if that or there's some mechanism of feeding from other scrutiny leads, just to see whether we're, this serves the scrutiny functions, as now, it's obviously taken sort of from the current constitution. I think that would be a useful discussion to have. We've got scrutiny panel tomorrow, but maybe the next one, would that work?
That would be really
Yeah.
helpful.
And maybe Louise, you could just invite you to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Popular person.
And I think it's also, I think there is, in terms of sort of making this sort of user friendly, I would say that scrutiny is obviously one of the most sort of public facing functions of the council. So we really do need to get it right, extra right in terms of accessibility and transparency.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to yeah.
In council, just to let you know, as we did it for this article, we predominantly lifted.
Yeah.
But when we come on to the wider scrutiny procedure rules,
Yeah.
we have already an hour of engagement with Sonia and with Tracy at the office level to ensure that as we're reviewing it as officers, because obviously they are responsible for the scrutiny side, not the legal and governance side, that we're consulting as we need to with other officers of the council.
I think what would actually be helpful in terms of scrutiny would be for everything relevant to scrutiny to come to the panel. Just for
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to join as well.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
And can we liaise with the officers that maybe that can be like the first item on the agenda so that we can log on and participate then. Go back up into our
next agenda.
Can I leave that for you? So leave that with you to action, Louise, and if you make a note of it, it's an action here. Thank you. So we've done 62, 63. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. 64, 65. You okay, Councillor Ashton?
Yes. I'm just trying to give my apologies to Craig Player, who got on with stomach. I'm still coping with this.
Okay, let's look at 66 and 67. I think sometimes, there isn't anything to tweak and that is fine. But as we've said, we can come back in and revise, because if the membership changes, it might be a good opportunity to ask people just to re-review where we are at this point. But we might want to submit those before the meeting rather than pick up in the meeting, so we can give everybody the opportunity to do that. So let's do 68 and 69. And then we are now on Article 9, page 70 and 71. And 73.
Again, I appreciate that we have the article on ward forms. We had the discussion about ward forms earlier. If obviously following the workshop meeting, we need to come back and look at this article again. We can.
That's what I was thinking, because one thing that I didn't say before Sonia went, I think what will be good in the workshop, Sonia mentioned working with the comms team, and that is critical actually, because sometimes people come to ward forums because there's a consultation on, and they think if they don't get to that ward forum, they don't have a say in the consultation. So how we can work with comms to reinforce when you have a consultation, don't feel that you have to go just to a ward forum to have your say. I don't think we can reiterate that enough. A ward forum is about a conversation and a piece of engagement at a specific time.
So yeah, that's what sprung to mind. But yeah, you're right. We might have to amend this in light of the workshop. Full.
Yes, Chair, I think I agree as well, because my point about the website is, and as it were, some kind of a report being made, is that there will be people who don't come to Ward Forum, and I expect Councillor Trouson's found the same thing, is that some people can't make the forum for whatever reason, or they just don't come, but then they feel left out, or that they somehow, so it's really good if we can provide that, and I think we need to kind of work that in so that people can know that it is one part of the process, but also that they can be included in, and that has in the past been the constant function.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, with things of. The other thing about this was just in terms of, I was a bit puzzled at 10.4 where it's saying all where there will be specific goals for citizens, but with a capital C in managing business of the Ward Forum. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. I mean, I've done joint forums with police before now, where they've taken quite a role rather than us. Is that what it means, or?
It could be things like that, or for example, it could also be where wards you have tenant residents associations, and you actually want the tenant residents association to take an more active role in the meeting itself and how that's going to go forward.
Yes.
So it's those types of, or I guess it's more organisations than individuals.
Yeah.
But for example, you could have a resident who wants to come and talk about something specific.
Yes.
And you may want to have a discussion with them about, and you want to talk about this, how might we deal with that at a ward forum? We'll give the floor to you to explain your concern, how we're going to actually manage that business.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, but I agree. I think it's just what we need to anticipate once we look
Yeah,
at it further.
absolutely.
Yeah.
74, 75. $76, $77.
I assume that the stuff about head of paid service, I've been through this so many times, comes from other legal documents. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's helpful for those watching if we remember to reference the part of the article that we're talking about, just with the numbers if we can remember to get them. 78 and 79. Mm. 80 and 81.
With that.
82. Now beginning Article
13, which is decision making. So if we look at 83 and
Sorry, on page 82, just wondering about employee code of conduct. Would we actually have a link to to that code of conduct? Is that
I think that's what
Somewhere in-
that and part X. I suppose it's when
Part
they've
X.
got part X of the
Yeah.
constitution. That's
Yeah.
where it'd be there, Councillor Rathbone.
certainly think if people are interested in knowing about that, they should have a link. Sorry.
That's all right. No apologies needed. Let's go on to Article 13, decision making, which is if we look at page 83 and 84.
A lot of part X here.
Yeah.
Yes,
This-
yes, it's again, it's one of those things we may, as we go along, we may decide we want to move articles around, reorder them, if we think an article has should be given greater prominence and importance. So yes, there are a lot of extra references throughout the whole thing. You'll see that a lot going forward.
Wood forums. Have you moved on from wood forums?
Yes.
So can I just go back to it
If
for a
you want
moment?
somebody wants to raise.
It's necessary for a wood forum to be chaired by a councillor. Can it not be chaired by another member of the public?
So are you asking a general question or is it in relation to the constitution?
It's 10.7.
Yeah, okay, yeah, if you reference the number, so we'll go back to 10 points. That's all right, no apologies needed. Each forum is chaired by a councillor who's elected by council. So what you're saying is that you want it to change that someone in the
Well, I'm
community.
just asking, is it necessary for it to be chaired by one councillor? I would have thought, in terms of breaking down, the participation in the democratic process, the meeting itself should elect a chair that need to be a councillor.
Ward forums are not a creature of statute.
Yeah.
They are something that we as a council have. We have ward forums. Not all local authorities have ward forums. Some authorities, rather than ward forums, will have local area committees, which then bring the whole thing into the realms of formal decision making. But we, as I understood it, we as a council went down the ward forum option. So because they are not something that is controlled by statute, how we elect to run them is a matter for us as an authority. So there's no legal requirement they have to be chaired by a councillor.
Yeah.
It's just that is what the council's decided it will do. So, if there is a desire to change that, then there will be nothing to stop that change from happening.
I think that would be something that would have to be discussed in a wider, wider meeting setting amongst members.
Perhaps again,
Collectively.
discussion at the workshop.
I think so. I'd bring it up at the workshop because then you've got ideas if you change that, how you'd nominate, how you'd vote a chair in the meeting, how you'd nominate if more people want to chair the meeting, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
Do you need tellers? How do you vote for it? So it's definitely something to explore in the workshop to think about if we change the constitution, how we make it manageable to affect that change. But yeah, so we'll put that as an action for working group. Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you, Councillor.
The reason I think it's relevant is because, if councillors are chairing a meeting, it puts them it separates them from, puts them in a position of authority, and actually that's what we want. What we want is actually to change that sort of balance and make residents feel more empowered.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think we discuss it at the workshop just to say that if we put it in place, that everyone knows how it will work. That's all. What you don't want to do is change the structure, but no one's quite clear of how you do that. If councillors chair the meeting, it's one of three or one of two. It's quite straightforward who chairs. If you've got a meeting of 100 people and you're going to elect a chair at the meeting, it's just helpful if we have some structure in place to facilitate that.
Yeah.
A nomination of the chair to the meeting or the
the meeting or the engagement piece move swiftly. So that's all. But yeah, it absolutely helps in terms of bringing the community closer to the organisation and feeling that they have an equal stake in the meeting. So let's go on to page 85, Article 14, Finance, Contracts and Legal Matters. If we look at 85 and 86 together. And then Article 15, Review and Revision of the Constitution. If we look at 80, 87 and 88 together, is it the same article?
Chair, just to flag at 15.5, you'll see that was attempted at providing greater clarity about when the monitoring officer may amend the constitution without having to go through full council. So as you said earlier, if we're required to do so because of those bit of change in the legislation, hopefully non-contentious grammatical typing and formatting errors. If we think something's actually going to improve public accessibility, so if we look at the wording and think, do you know what, that would benefit from greater clarity, not to change the meaning or alter the meaning, but to provide that clarity. One again that is around, so if for example there is a restructuring and as we had with renaming the former neighbourhoods and housing, yes, we did do that under the monitoring officer's power to make those changes to climate, homes and economy, but to make that clear that that's what we can do. And then the last one is a lift directly from what it currently says. And we're still debating about that one, which is updating arrangements arising from external factors, and the clarity about whether or not that explains what we may need to give an example, I think.
Yes. Okay. I suppose that we need to cross-reference there as well to the earlier part of the document when we first started talking about a monitoring officer. Okay, great. So let's look at Article 16, suspension, interpretation and publication of the Constitution. Let's look at 80, 89 and 90 together.
Nothing to page follow on the current document. No, those are the existing constitution that was just there to assist in terms of so we have reached the end.
Okay, so what I would recommend is that that we just recirculate this for people to just go over again. And if there are any comments or contributions or queries, that we amend that and agree that by email and update it before the next meeting.
Yes, Chair, I mean, I do suspect that Councillor Gordon will have a few more comments in the part that she's missed.
Yes.
So, and which would prove to be useful. Sorry, if I just maybe misunderstanding 16.4, you meet council member may not challenge a ruling of the Speaker or the Chair in the constructive interpretation of this Constitution. Sounds very broad ranging. I mean, a member wants to challenge some ruling of the Speaker, surely they're entitled to do so.
That it is a slightly different language from the current wording that we have. We reflected upon the wording at an officer level following the governance review that took place at Northumberland Council. which is fairly recent, where the very clear guidance that was being given by those who are responsible for that governance review is that there is a time and a place for people to challenge a ruling, and obviously you can request an explanation of the ruling. But if the Speaker rules, or in their case, the Chair of that council rules that this is the interpretation that's being applied to the committee or to the council meeting, or indeed, whichever meeting is a chair is controlling, then it is not a meeting for the sense of good conduct of the meeting is not to descend into a large scale debate at that point in time about is the chair or the speaker correct, because the impression that then gives to the public is that the chair or the speaker has no control over the meeting, and it is all about being representative of the fact that it is the chair's function to be in charge of the meeting. So yes, it's not by me suggesting that you can't ask for an explanation, but it's trying to avoid not that I think certainly I've never seen it in my 2+ years of members sort of getting into to and fro of what I don't think that interpretation is right, and going back and forwards, and then obviously the meeting can't progress.
I suppose if you get lots of points of order and queries in terms of the chair's decision, it's how you have an open and robust conversation query in the public, but actually the speaker is chairing that meeting and has ultimate decision-making process in terms of protocol and procedure and the overseeing of the protocol of the meeting. But it's how you word that with, as Councillor Rathbone is rightly saying, how you word that without making people feel that they can't question generally.
I think Louise's explanation is quite good, if that could be written down.
It was, wasn't it?
It was,
I'll
yes.
have to try and remember what you said there, Councillor Rathbone.
Oh, well, if it's recorded, you have to.
I'll go back and recording the meeting. Yes. Another advantage of recording live streaming meetings.
On the 24-hour clock there by 1990 and here.
Yes, you do.
And I'm not trying to transport us back in time at all. Okay. Any other queries or comments generally about the process? Anything from Dawn or anything from you or no? Okay. Dawn, anything further that we need from us on that question before I go on to the last item on the agenda? Okay, so the last item is any urgent business. I haven't been notified, but given that we are within time, I'm feeling quite generous if we do have any urgent business, right? No?
So Chair, it's not urgent, but just for future consideration for maybe our next meeting or one of our forthcoming meetings to think how we can engage with the Youth Parliament in some way, maybe inviting them to one of our committee meetings, maybe thinking about how we can in some way include reference, a more deep reference to them within the constitution, to the Youth Parliament and Hackney's Youth Parliament, what it does. It's not so much its constitution in much how it's made up, but something that refers to it because it is an important part of the journey and of what we're doing. So
that's a really good idea. And I know that you and I have spoken about, I'm very conscious of how the general public will access this, and I think we should work with the comms team, the communication team here in the council, because I know there are groups of people that we normally go out and talk to and have dialogue with, and I think that it would be helpful for us to take this out to people in the community and say, is this meaningful? Does it work? Hard. And I think we should need to do that with hard copies and getting people to come into the town hall and to some people to give us feedback when they access it online. Because I'm just conscious that we're doing all of this and we think that we're making it more accessible. And for me, that's quite exciting, right? If we get the community more engaged. But actually, it's only transformative if the people that we're making the change for actually say, actually, it is better because of what we're doing. So I think that's something we need to think about at some point as well. So if we do the Youth Parliament first, and then we do the community engagement piece after. Okay. All right. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
And Mario, if you are ready, you can stop recording the meeting.